Thanks for the introduction, Matt. So I'm going to talk about the All of Us research program, the precision medicine initiative that's being funded by the NIH. And if you want to take a break right now, this would be a good time to do it because I have no data to show you. The only thing that I have to show you is sort of the plan for this large initiative, which is intended to, over the next 4 to 5 years, recruit 1 million people and follow them for every kind of event that you can imagine, including cardiovascular events. So my goal here is just to introduce this topic to you so that it'll be familiar to you. And certainly if you want to sign up and volunteer, I can give you a card and you can sign up and volunteer. So I think this headline in the Wall Street Journal from January of 2017 sort of reflects the concept that Mort was talking about at the very beginning of the program tonight. And the purpose of this article was to get across the idea that if you collected enough data, and if it was immediately being collected, so not something necessarily that you only collect once in time and leave it alone, like many of the studies that we've been talking about already tonight, like even Mesa, Framingham, that have multiple examinations, still those examinations are really far apart. But a project like what's being imagined here for this precision medicine initiative is that there might be sensors that people could carry around with them, that those data could be accessible to the research program. Those sensors could be obviously things that you already carry with you. Your watches, your phones, you name it. So this article is imagining a future where your phone knows enough about you that you can ask this question: Siri, am I about to have a heart attack? And how would Siri know that? Well, maybe there's physiologic data that's being collected and analyzed, and in addition to all the background data that you have about yourself, what your lipid values were, what your blood pressure values have been, what your family history is, what your genetic makeup is, and so forth. So many of you probably know that Dr. Collins, the director of the NIH, is a geneticist. He's had a long-standing interest in the idea that was presented on that last slide. Could you actually reach the point where, with all of the data that's potentially available on a given individual, including ongoing data collection on a daily basis, could you get to the point where you could actually pinpoint in a precise way, so the name precision medicine, pinpoint who's going to have a heart attack? And that's, again, getting back to what Mort was talking about at the beginning. If you could really target an individual and say, you've got an 80% chance of a heart attack in the next year. That's very different than saying, 10% in 10 years or 20% in 10 years. And I don't know about your patients, but my patients sometimes say to me, 20% in 10 years, that's high risk. That means I got an 80% chance that I'm not going to have a heart attack. Those are the same people that go to the casinos who really don't understand probability. And that's how the casinos make money. Our job, though, is theoretically to do better than that, to do better than a roll of the dice or a spin of the wheel. So a couple of years ago, Francis Collins, director of the NIH, succeeded in convincing President Obama that what we needed in the United States was the American equivalent of the UK Biobank. And so I'll talk a little bit about the UK Biobank toward the end of the talk, but President Obama bought this idea, and the U.S. Congress and Senate bought this idea and have funded this idea. And in the 2015 State of the Union address, this is what Obama said: "My hope is that this study, this precision medicine initiative, would create the architecture foundation whereby," and this is really why I have no data, because this is a study that's going to collect baseline data over the next 5 years, and then hopefully also collect enough events over the subsequent 5 years that we might actually have some findings to report 7 years from now, 8 years, 10 years from now. And this was announced in the State of the Union address in 2015, and it's become a reality. Data collection centers were funded initially in 2016, and then after a period of additional planning, those data collection centers have been up and going. And my role in this project is PI of one of the data collection centers in Illinois. So I just want to give you a brief overview of this. The title that Mort gave to this is the most expensive NIH study ever. It's not yet the most expensive NIH study ever. It's nowhere near as expensive as the Women's Health Initiative, which was probably $1 billion 20 years ago. So, but I suspect that over time, when all of the ancillary studies are added in and all of the data collection is accounted for, this will probably be $1 billion study, maybe more. The current allocation that the U.S. government has provided for this study is about $230 million. So it's a non-trivial number, and it's a reasonable commitment from the NIH. And the funding for it really comes from a special act of Congress, the 21st Century Cures Act, which was actually enacted just before the current presidential administration. So this was one of the things that got enacted before Obama left office. Let me talk a little bit about the UK Biobank, because that's not a dream, that's a reality. The UK Biobank was started about 7 years ago now. It intended to recruit 500,000 citizens of the UK who were also patients of the British National Health Service. And I'm going to come back to that point later, because that's a very important distinctive difference between the UK Biobank and the US equivalent. So 500,000 people were proposed to be participants in the UK Biobank. The UK Planning Committee spent 2 years piloting a variety of different strategies to initiate this study, and they piloted things like, could you do reasonably easily an electrocardiogram in 500,000 people? And would it be cost effective as part of a research study to do that, or could you just rely on the data from the health record? And in the end, they decided not to include an electrocardiogram as a baseline measure. And I'll tell you that neither have we in the US All of Us study. The decision was made that you could do some simple calculation. You're going to recruit 1 million people and it costs you $25 or something to do an electrocardiogram. That's $25 million. And then ask yourself whether that would provide new information that we don't already know from considerably smaller studies, or you name it. So these are hard decisions. And maybe that's what some of the questions could be about later on, since I have no data. UK Biobank has succeeded in recruiting their 500,000 people. They recruited from clinical practices. And what they did in general was basically set up tables, not unlike what you're eating on tonight. They set up tables outside of the practices, gave people information about them. The doctors endorsed the participation in the study. People enrolled in the study using mostly paperless enrollment systems. And then they agreed to have some additional data collection, like a blood sample that could be stored as part of the biobank. Over the course of time, the UK Biobank has added additional ancillary studies and sub-studies to get some deeper phenotyping on subsets. So there's a study that got funded separately to do whole body MRI on 50,000 people out of the 500,000 people. And additional sub-studies have been added on, and we expect that the same thing will happen here in the US study. The US study was originally called the Precision Medicine Initiative, and I think some marketing person came along and said that's a bad name. And so they changed it to another bad name, the All of Us Study. And that's what it's now called, the All of Us Study. And it ends up being a joke within the study, because whenever we want to talk about it, we say, well, all of us think that. And then we go, well, actually what we mean is the people in the room here, not all those people out there that you want to recruit. But the All of Us study is the name of the cohort study. It's intending to recruit 1 million or more people, and to follow them on an ongoing basis. And the follow-up in this study is not going to be like what you're familiar with the MESA study or the Framingham study or clinical trials. These people are not going to be seen again, most likely. They'll be seen at one examination, brief examination. I'm going to talk about it in a few minutes. And then the hope would be that the additional follow-up would be either from electronic sensor data or electronic health record data. There's two kinds of methods of engagement in the study. One is through healthcare provider organizations, and that's what our involvement is in Illinois. The academic medical centers, University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Northwestern University, Rush University, and North Shore Medical Center have agreed to serve as a consortium, and our job over the next 5 years is to recruit 100,000 people. To the best of my knowledge, none of us has ever recruited 100,000 people, but we're gonna try to deliver on that. And there are 10 other academic medical centers around the country that have made a similar commitment and got funding to do it. And they are located in the usual places that NIH funding goes. The Northeast, Illinois, and the West. And there's relatively little funding for this study anywhere from Nevada to Illinois, and from Illinois to New York. So you say, well, that's not all of us. That's certainly not all of America. The people who actually designed this study thought that it would be helpful to get broader representation well beyond people who are associated with academic medical centers. So if you were going to be asked, how would you recruit 200,000, 300,000 people in the United States for a brief examination, a blood sample, and a urine sample, and not have them associated with a major academic medical center, where would you send them? Well, you could send them to Walmart, right? You could send them to Walgreens. You could send them to other similar kinds of places that are everywhere. And the people who made the proposal were from Scripps in California, and their idea was to send people to Walgreens. And Walgreens has gotten on board with this. I don't know how many Walgreens stores there are, 5,000, 10,000, some huge number of Walgreens stores. And they claim that there's a Walgreens store within, it's almost like Walmart. within 10 miles of almost everybody in the United States. And all you need to be a participant in this study is to go online, sign up, fill out some questionnaires, get a referral to either an academic medical center or to one of the Walmart stores, where you would get a brief examination, really brief examination, blood pressure, body weight, height, waist circumference, hip circumference, and then you're done. Blood draw, urine sample, goodbye. For now, but we're going to contact you again. So that's the general design of the study. So here's the list of things that we're getting: surveys, electronic health record data, we hope, some physical measurements, biosamples. The wearable technologies are currently a dream. It's not part of the funding of the study, but the hope would be that there would be access to wearable technologies and geospatial data that might come from your friendly phone. Another aspect of this study that is perhaps helpful to the SHAPE initiative is that unlike many other studies that we're all familiar with, the investigators who participate in this don't own the data. The NIH owns the data for this study. And so anybody will have access to the data. That's not necessarily true of the biosamples. Those are going to be highly competitive in terms of proposals because they're not renewable. The data in a de-identified fashion will be available to anybody, including your children, some kid in 7th grade somewhere who's got a bright idea, who goes on the internet, pulls down some data, and cures cancer. That's sort of an idea that gets talked about as part of this study. And if you're familiar with the UK Biobank, that's kind of what is available now in the UK Biobank. You can get access to the data. You don't have to be somebody who collected the data. If you want to get access to biosamples in the UK Biobank, you have to make a proposal, you have to come with funding, and so forth. So it's very similar here. The program includes a biobank, which is at Mayo Clinic. They built a brand new building. Picture what it would be like to house the samples for a 1 million person study. So there's 6 blood aliquots and 10 urine aliquots that will be derived from every participant in the study. And so they built a warehouse in Rochester, Minnesota that I've been told is about the size of 2 football fields. And it's full of millions of dollars of robots. And that's where the biobank is going to be. Again, if you're interested in some of these logistics, it's really fantastically amazing because the Mayo Clinic has contracts with virtually every hospital in the country for collection of samples and shipping to Mayo already. So Mayo Clinic has a contract with FedEx to go to literally every hospital in the country, pick up samples at the end of the day, get them to the FedEx shipping at the local airport, and get them to Mayo by the next morning before the samples expire, as far as keeping them on ice and so forth. And another little tidbit that I learned about this is that in order to keep this from anybody from screwing this up, FedEx has a color-coded box that only goes to Mayo Clinic. No one else can use that color. No one. So I don't know what the color is exactly, but if somebody tries to use that color, FedEx won't take it. And furthermore, FedEx will come in and actually package the samples for you. So the investigators, we don't have to do that. All we have to do is get the samples to a central storage area. The FedEx courier comes in with the Mayo Clinic box and ships it out. And so biobank, there's a data center at Vanderbilt that is going to receive all the data. There are these healthcare organizations that I talked about, and then a number of other aspects of the study. It's a huge undertaking that's being coordinated by the NIH. This is a map, and so I wasn't exactly kidding. You can see there's a gigantic hole right here where there's no funded organization associated with the study. On the other hand, the red are the regional medical centers that have been selected. So Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Pittsburgh, New York, Boston, what does that say? Southern, I think that's in Alabama. There's another one in Florida, Arizona, etc. So there's about 10 or so academic medical centers have been selected. There are a number of federally qualified health centers that have been selected. Matt, how am I doing on time?
I'll pray another 5.
All right. Okay. I think this is my last slide, so I'm good. So what I wanted to try to convey to you is the idea that, you know, this is an aspirational project. It's probably enrolled so far 8,000 people out of the million. That's more or less by design, the fact that we're starting kind of slowly. We're trying to test all of the procedures. In particular, the biobank. The biobank wants to make sure that every sample that's received gets handled properly, so they're kind of gearing up slowly. And the clinical centers have been added one at a time. We got lucky in Illinois. We got to be the last group to join to get on board with this. So by the middle of next year, by the middle of 2018, this thing will be at full speed, and we'll be recruiting over 100,000 people a year, more like 200,000 people a year for the next 4 years from the academic centers, and at least 200,000 people, hopefully, from the direct volunteers I showed you from Walgreens. The new model of research in terms of its openness, an aspiration to collect a rich set of data, and hopefully by collecting, you know, gigantic amounts of data on people and linking it to electronic health record, that this will create a new opportunity for precision of prediction and medical outcomes research. Now, getting back to something that Mort said at the beginning, if you wanted to predict heart attacks within the next month or 2 or 3, you have to have a lot of cases that occurred within a month or 2 or 3 of whatever data you were collecting. And studies like MESA, we have a few. I think maybe we have 20 people in MESA who had an event within a short time of the data collection. That's not going to get very far. And even if we get MESA and Rotterdam and Heinz-Nixdorf and so on and so on and so on, I think we did a table last year when we added all this up, and we still have relatively few cases that were of heart attack that occurred within heart attack or sudden death that occurred within a short time. On the other hand, if you add in UK Biobank with 500,000 people, and now you're starting to talk about a relatively larger number of cases that occur, and then 1 million people in the All of Us study. Potentially, a research study could get enough cases and samples that you could actually, do the aspirational idea that Mort was talking about at the beginning. So that's my last slide. I'm happy to try to answer any questions as long as you don't ask me for any data. Apparently I shut off any questions at all. Nathan.
Yeah, hi Phil. Yeah. So that was a fantastic presentation, and actually we're one of the Vanguard centers participating. I'm happy to say I've actually gone through the process as a participant. So yeah, it's I think a very important study.
So you're 1 in a million, Nathan.
Yeah, I'm at least 1 in a million, and yeah, I think it's a fantastic study for actually everyone to get involved with, and to contribute to this important mission. Just a couple, well actually one comment and one question. One comment is, certainly at least what I've done through the consent process does require a fair amount of technical skill in a computer. So I'm concerned about being able to get a representative cross-section of people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds, perhaps, or skill, or like educational attainment, things like that. So that's one point. And I guess, if I'm not mistaken, they're still trying to maybe decide what they're going to ask at baseline, because the medical history was very, very basic, and in fact didn't even ask whether I've had prevalent CAD or diabetes or most other conditions. They think maybe cancer, and if I smoked, if I use recreational drugs or something, very basic things. So I'm curious kind of at what stage the protocol is in place, and then also the opportunity. I understand there's an opportunity to maybe what measures should be done, what like perhaps biomarkers might be considered. So I just had those thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, I was trying to give a fairly high level view of it, but your questions are very, very, very appropriate. There's been a lot of debate about what actually needs to be physically collected new from participants, because the study relies very heavily on connecting to the patient's medical record. And so one of the big discussions within the study is, well, if the data that you're interested in is already in the medical record, do we need to collect it again? Do we need to ask people about it? Do we need to, and which would be more accurate? The data in the medical record or the data that people would self-report? But what I just said also implies that we have actually access to the medical record and that it's comprehensive.
And that the participant is being examined at the same place to get your care.
Well, the issue here is whether it's comprehensive, okay? Because we know in America that people are not really part of a single system, and their record is not, doesn't follow them like, a National Health Service in the UK follows them. So it's a long answer to what the study has in mind to try to link all of the electronic health record data, but in simplistic terms, there's a belief that eventually systems could be built so that every person's electronic health record could flow into a single portal and be accessible to a study like this. Now that would mean that the person would have to have an electronic health record everywhere he goes. Every encounter would have to have an electronic record, which is not true in the United States right now. So, I mean, if you dig a little bit deeper into some of the design features of the study, there's some questionable issues here. Some pretty questionable issues. I don't want to get too deep into it because I may say something that gets back to Dr. Collins. But, I think it really is a big question whether it's going to work. I think your other question was about, the complexity of enrolling. And that's also being discussed, pretty substantially, because what we do in other studies in order to allow people who are less technically capable, who are harder to reach, et cetera, is do a lot of hand-holding. And hand-holding is expensive. okay, walking people through the enrollment process, et cetera. These are very expensive kinds of things to do. And this study is designed to be cheap per participant. And it puts a lot of the onus for participation back on the participant. And that's a disconnect from the concept of all of us. So, you know, my guess is what's going to happen is that although they're talking about this as a, you know, completely designed entity, it's probably not. And probably what will happen is by the end of the first year, a lot of things are going to start to shake out. They're going to realize that, hey, this doesn't work. You know, we're not reaching the people we want to reach, that, you know, we're asking the wrong questions, we're not getting the electronic health record data that we thought we were going to get, and any number of different concerns. And then you're either going to have the whole study fall apart or they're going to be redesigned. That's my guess.
Thanks, Phil. Great talk. Learned a lot from it. You might not know the answer to this, but I guess it's maybe an open question. Why 1 million people? What was there anything to drive that decision? Is that just kind of a sexy number? And of course,
it's two times 500,000.
Right. That's true.
And which and so the UK is 500,000. So I mean, we're at least twice as good as that. So I mean,
so no scientific.
Absolutely, as far as I know, and maybe there's somebody in the audience here who does know, but I hope Dr. Collins is not listening to me right now. When it comes to the UK Biobank, I can tell you that the 500,000 was actually not a completely crazy made-up number. If you go to the protocol of the UK Biobank, which is online, it's freely available, anybody can read it, and what it says is that they picked this number of 500,000 because they estimated that by 5 years in, they would have 5,000 cases of coronary disease, 8,000 cases of diabetes, and so on and so on and so on. And so they said, you know, if we have that number of cases and the rich clinical data that they presumably will have and the data from the biosamples, they believed that they had a large enough sample size to be able to answer some important questions. So, you know, you could say, well, okay, I mean, it makes sense to have maybe even a bigger number and get those cases faster. But I don't recall that I ever saw any justification for the 1 million other than it's a big number, sort of. In some ways, it's a really small number. I mean, you know, if you're interested in diseases that are uncommon, 1 million people still, you know, if you're interested in scleroderma, if you're interested in Parkinson's disease, you know, a lot of different kinds of things. You know, we'll be able to understand certain things about common disease pretty quickly, but like rare disease, unless they target it, which they say they don't want to do, which I'd like to do. Okay, I mean, some of us may go under the table and, you know, recruit our favorite disease, but that's not what they're talking about.
Maybe just a couple quick questions to move on.
Sorry, a brief comment, if you don't mind, and a quick question. I'm one of these people from the UK, Scotland in fact. I had a peripheral involvement in the biobank. We piloted ECG recording. It was decided not to do it because it was going to take 15 minutes for people to take their tops off, get dressed and so on, particularly older people, so it was abandoned from that point of view. Having said that, there are now ECGs in the biobank. I think they came from those having an MRI, and they wouldn't have time for an MRI. Time for an ECG. But could I just ask, I mean, in Scotland, for example, every hospital admission is reported to a central point. So we can follow, if somebody dies, then we can trace the deaths and so on. It can all be linked into the sort of UK biobank type study. Does the same thing apply in the USA?
So we have something called the National Death Index. So deaths are reported. But hospitalizations, to the best of my knowledge, are not reported to any central location.
So if somebody has an MI you might not know about.
That's right.
Oh dear, dear, dear.
That's right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think there was a question here. glad to see so much interest in no data.
This has a question, it's a question mostly for the group. I mean, you're talking about the percentages of cases in such a large cohort, but what's the number for predicting an MI within a year that it will be needed in the SHAPE initiative such that the data will work out? I mean, what is that?
I can help, Phil. We actually did the Excel sheet that Phil was talking about. We went around the world, everywhere, including the UK Biobank. The last number our Excel sheet reached somewhere around 1,200 people who had an event within months after their blood draw. One of the reasons we were very interested in machine learning is to make the best out of that. Obviously, the biggest challenge is for us to access those samples, blood samples, or plasma or whatever, be able to run very sophisticated fishing expedition or survey of various things. We were talking about not only genomic, proteomic, metabolomic, lipidomic, go even microbiomic, things that have not been touched, and just create a huge, massive amount of data. And then obviously the usual suspects, coronary calcium, traditional risk factors, and so on. And with that kind of machine learning and this data, I would say even this study would not be able to create in 5 years, 1,000 or 2,000.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
So really, it's the way to do it is just have to go knock on everybody's door around the world and collect this data.
Yeah, and for the SHAPE idea, you would hope to have very rich phenotyping of the participants, not some fairly superficial level phenotyping. So, I suspect that, unless there's additional data collection that would have to be funded separately, not as part of the main study, there wouldn't be very deep phenotyping.
This looks, you just said that it was meant to be a cheaper study. This is the most expensive, cheaper study that will be done.
Expensive, cheap study.
To get that. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We have the last.